the idea that the American dream and the American project, if you like, of Tom Jefferson and the others could carry on, while Tom Paine had been busy in not only starting the American Revolution but starting the French Revolution, made America not only distinct as being the first constitutional republic since Rome, in many ways, the first modern constitutional republic. It also made, because of the influence of Tom Paine on the French Revolution, the idea that liberty and equality must be balanced under a rule of law, which the French didn't apply the last part to, the rule of law bit, with Robespierre, made the Americans give up on trying to influence Europe through constitutionalism and actively helping the French, and made them look more towards their interior and the West, and thus start to develop industry that was based domestically in the United States. I think that process, without getting off into another video project that I want to do about the stages in the United States history, but technology and also people's philosophical biases for and against things does have a massive effect on history and who people align with. For instance, if you take the development of different families within the United States, some legitimate, some criminal, some sort of in between. The Kennedys and the Bushes, who were before the two presidents, the father of the last George Bush, certainly did what most Americans did in terms of how they looked at the law, whereas the Americans who were at the time of the Revolution were really absolutely favouring a strict interpretation of the law, just like Ron Paul is saying that the US Constitution is the law, the highest law of the land, and the only law which can change the Constitution is either international treaty, which Ron Paul to a certain extent rejects the supremacy of international laws that the United States has signed up to over domestic constitutional law, although the United States Constitution says they're both equally relevant, and the other is through amendments through a 2/3 motion by Congress. Anyone can pick up the American Constitution and read it in an hour or a couple of hours, depending on what their reading speed is like and how well they process it. And that was the basis of what the American citizen, armed citizen society was supposed to be like. That's why gun culture is so strong, particularly in the Republican Party, although there are obviously people who are advocates in the Democratic Party. But I'll get to the fact that it's not quite as distinct as you would expect. Obviously by the time the Civil War happened in the 1860s, I believe, there was a great big divide between the industrialised North, which was taking in millions of people, give us your poor and huddled, frightened masses, and we were turning them into Americans, where they were bringing in massive amounts of people from Ireland, Germany and Sweden, in particular because of Sweden's famine, and over the whole era of the Victorian era, over 20 million people from England went to the United States. That is at the same time as they were moving into, English people were emigrating to Africa, particularly Southern Africa, South Africa, Kenya, and the Australias, as well as Canada. And you got a massive immigration of people, and so the empire really reduced the economic pressures on prices and things like that in terms of food and production and everything else, and over time the colonies are actually sending food and resources back to Britain. America's attempt at some sort of Latin American and Central American empire, with the development of Texas being its own republic and trying to reach the Pacific and everything else, and it sort of prevented that. But later ideas, they said one of the foundation stones of American supremacy will be when that stone is laid by the whole hemisphere of the Americas being united under American power. So in some ways, the idea of the Republican Party being having ideas that were formed through constitutionalism in Ron Paul's view, and not wanting to get into foreign adventures, is not exactly historically true, and he did admit this. He did say that yes, they did get into foreign adventures quite quickly, particularly against the Americans under Thomas Jefferson, doing expeditions to stop piracy and people being taken by the Ottomans, for instance, who had been raiding and taking about 2 million people from Cornwall for centuries, due to the weakness of the British military and naval power during the English Civil War, Charles I, which of course is where the Levellers and all the sort of those ideas which went on to and became connected with the Epicurean ideas all sort of stem from, which develops the ideas of Tom Paine and Tom Jefferson. A lot of the American Revolution was down to both the Roman Epicurean ideas, which were found in the book, as I said, with George Washington and Tom Jefferson, reading Lucretius's book, The Nature of Things. It's all about science and rationality, and also Stoic philosophy being in there as well to a certain extent, and of course sort of the Enlightenment brand of Christianity, all mixing together with the heady mix of the Levellers, who look back even further down to into the era between Rome and their own time, which was of course when the English were trying to resist Norman conquest. The Anglo-Saxons were resisting Norman conquest, and you see this reference to the American Revolution overthrowing the Norman yoke. Although if you see, as I have had conversations with Americans who seem to think that the Anglos, as they call them, were the Celts in ancient Britain before the Romans were there, which is of course ridiculous, because the English didn't come to Britain until 449, and the Normans had nothing to do with the Anglos, as the Americans keep calling them. The Normans were French-speaking Vikings who invaded Britain and overthrew the traditional law system. So going on through history, you'll see also Ron Paul referring back to the use of common law, which of course I mentioned, where the English were resisting the Norman yoke, the Norman overlords, the robber barons, another phrase that's used a lot in American history, especially in the pre and after war eras.